Okay. Yeah, there you are, Mark. Hang on.
There we go.
All right.
Yeah, I see Mark.
Yep.
All right. So we
Okay.
have 3 out of 4.
All right. So hang on 1 second. I'm gonna try to be slick.
You are slick.
I'm gonna try to be slick. Let's see if what make it. Hang on. Make it audio only. All right, hang on 1 second. See, I'm trying to get a picture of you that I can put in there, Rob, but it's not. Oh man, it won't even let me do that. God damn. Oh well. Anyhow, welcome, guys. It's so for those of you who are not aware by now, we're technology challenged for today's episode number 140, which I nicknamed the North Carolina JKD Notables. And it's unfortunate, like I said earlier, Ed and Mark, you were actually two of the first to do a 2-on-1 situation, right? And Rob Kelly, I've wanted to have on the program since forever, but I could never convince him to come on by himself. But he agreed to come on with the two of you and others who could not make it. So Rob Kelly, we can't see you, but we'd like to say welcome to the Jeet Kune Do Dialogue.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Oh man, this is okay. Well, we'll trot on. All right. So listen, Rob's senior to everybody. So why don't we do the introductions with him? Rob, give us the quick story of your martial art background and then your Jeet Kune Do specific background.
Okay. Well, I started training in my early teens. Did a little bit of, I wish I even knew what the style was. It was some sort of American style karate that was very prevalent in the 70s. And trained just a brief time there. It was actually a friend of my sister's who was teaching, and then they moved. So I was, just working out on my own, reading all the magazines, being very interested in Bruce Lee and reading about Dan Inosanto. Then trained with a friend in high school in Taekwondo. And after high school, I started training in Kimpo here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And the Kimpo system that we did and is still being taught is kind of a Kimpo karate. And at the time, the instructor was also into Hapkido. So that was where I really did most of my training early on. Got a black belt in Kimpo and was training and was actually getting ready for my second degree black belt test when the organization had a seminar down in Hilton Head. And at the seminar, there were Rick McElroy. I know him. He actually gave a demo in Kali. And I had only read about the Filipino martial arts and wanting desperately to be able to train with Dan Inosanto because of everything I'd read.
Right.
Never actually believing I would be able to, but thinking this would be great. And I asked him about private lessons. And to his credit, he didn't take my money. He said, "Well, where do you live?" I said, "Charlotte." He says, "Oh my God, you should train with Dickie Harrell." I'm like, "Who's Dickie Harrell?" He's like, I had no clue, no idea.
Right.
And so from that is where I actually went over to the old school that was on Central Avenue. This is where I know you've talked with Michael Brown and Reuben Griffith.
Right.
where they had trained with Larry Hartzell. I think we all know who Larry Hartzell is. He's actually from Charlotte, and he taught here for a number of years before he went back to California. And Dickie Harrell took over the school, was teaching. So when I went there and, told him I was wanting to train, and he graciously allowed me to train there. And in the advanced class, because there was a beginner and a advanced class, I was teaching children's karate at a Y. And so the nights I taught was the beginner class. And he said, well, you can go in the advanced class. You just got to keep up. And the first class is like, this is what I want to do. And after the second class is like, this is what my entire idea of martial arts is supposed to be. And it was just blowing me away. And by the second week, I decided to quit teaching Kempo and just go there, because I was finding myself wanting to teach what I had just learned, because I saw so much value in it, but also realizing that I can't teach, tomorrow what I learned today. I just can't, you can't do that. And, I had morals. Who knew? And I just couldn't do that. I couldn't teach what I was wanting to do, because I had just learned it and didn't really know it myself. So I told Dickie, I'm quitting teaching. I'm coming here. I'm training. And I was accepted there. Started going to seminars through there. He closed his school down for a little over a year. And to this day, I don't know why he chose me, but he took me on as a private student and never charged me a penny for private lessons. We trained for a little over a year, learned a lot. And then he opened another school, and I helped him there some. This was back in the 80s. Mm-hmm. The Great Smoky Mountain camps, which that you guys have probably heard of, you youngsters.
Yeah, they've only heard of it.
Yeah. So, this was, you got to understand at this time, your personal instructors, they would, you would see them train, but it was pretty rare for you to see them train with someone that was from a different system and they were actually a student. You never saw a master training with someone from a different system and being a student. And this was something that Sifu Dan did at the camps. There was, it was, Guru Dan, Ajahn Chai, Sifu Larry, Sifu Tim Tackett. There was Graciela Casillas, Francis Fong, Sifu Francis came up there. There was quite a number of different people. I know I'm leaving people out, but to see Guru Dan train, having Ajahn Chai hold the pads for him, and to be a student and to be, to see, if you've ever seen anyone train in Muay Thai and you realize how hard it can be physically, this was something that masters didn't let students see. Right. They were masters. They weren't students. Yeah. They could learn something, and, they couldn't be tired, and he just, he didn't care. It's like, yeah, I'm a student. I'm going to learn, and this is part of it. And to see that was just so impressive to me, that you could stay a student forever. Yeah. So, I made it to every year that the camp was on. I would go to seminars, keep training with Dickie. They can't see. And would fly out to LA and stay for a couple weeks. There was one time when I was out there and my living arrangements kind of fell through, and Grodan and Sumapala says, well, here, just come stay at the house.
Yeah.
So, I stayed at his house for about 5 weeks.
When I edit this, I'm gonna put because you guys, Mark and Ed, did you see the pictures that I put up?
I did.
Okay, you saw them. All right. The only problem is that when I put those up, I can't keep talking and nobody hears me. Right. So
we'd rather hear you.
I'm gonna drop myself out again, and I'm gonna put in what I consider to be a remarkable photograph, and you tell everybody what the photograph is, okay?
Okay. That is at the Marina Del Rey Academy, Inasano Academy. And that's part of the Cabrica Brong class. That was one of the times when I was out there and actually stayed for about 5 weeks at his house. And he was giving me private lessons in Cabrica Brong in his backyard. And I was attending, the classes with him. And they were just, wanting to do a picture. And so, Paula's like, here, make sure everyone's wearing the blue, sweats and shirt. And, we trained and then we got a picture. So that's what that is. Can you guys recognize most of the people there?
I have to look closer.
Picture's kind of small, so I'm having a little trouble. I know to Sima Paula's right is Salim Asli. And I'm on the to Grudan's his left, the right of the picture. Let's see, in the front there is Burton Richardson, in the middle, Chess Stahelski to his right, Damon Cara to his left. And I'm just having trouble seeing the picture to identify the others. You may be able to identify them. But it was a great time. Guru Dan is just an incredibly giving person. We would, it was pretty great seeing at the house. But like he would get up and it's like, yeah, we're going to go somewhere. And, we would go to different places. And like, we went to a Pendicaro Paul de Forest school, and it was like I was getting private lessons there.
Yeah.
And what I found out later was that it was actually his time. It was Guru Dan's time to go for a lesson, and because I was there, it was like, here, you take it.
Right.
I was like, so this is pretty,
I forget who I was talking to. I think it was Dave Lear. I was talking to him yesterday morning, and he was telling me that Sifu Inasano's living room was not a living room. It was a workout area, right?
Well, when I was there, it was a living room, but the chairs can all be moved back pretty easily. And, like you throw a mat down and Yori Nakamura came over. And so had got a 4-hour private lesson with him on Shudo. And Larry came walking by and was like, hey, he's like, he's coming in. And so he's in there. And he actually, we dummied for each other.
Right. All right. So Rob, so here's Ed, you go first, right? So Rob just regaled us ancient stories, but ancient in this regard is a respectful term. Okay. All right.
Sure.
So now you give us first your impressions on what you just heard.
That sounds absolutely amazing. To be a fly on the wall or anything like that with things like that. Like just being able to, you know, stay with Guru Dan and you know, having a 4-hour private with Sensei Yori Nakamura and having, you know, Sifu Larry Hart. Like it's just that's the prime time that it just sounds, it's such like amazing times in just martial arts, like past, like where you could be there and just encapsulate it, and you can't reproduce anything like that. It's just an amazing story in time that I'm super envious.
Mark.
Yeah. I mean, I met Rob, and most of my training really started with him, a majority of it, but it was the early to mid 90s. I don't remember exactly what year, 93 maybe, 94. And I had been training in some parks around the Charlotte area, and I had some friends, and most people were really good. I met one guy that was a fraud, but most everybody was pretty squared away. And I kept hearing, you know, Rob's name, man, you got to train with this guy, Rob Kelly. And I met some of his students before I met him. Mm-hmm. And one day I met Rob. I forget where it was. It was somewhere. And I just remember seeing him, and he had a few people with him. I think a guy named Doug was one of them. And he had the Inosanto like shirt on with the embroidery all over it. It was like a sweatshirt or something. And I just remember thinking, man, this guy is legit. You know, I've been trying to find someone that is actually trained with these people for a long time, like the train with the first generation. And so I went to this little school in Mint Hill, Scott's, right? And it was like, and this little place had carpet. There was no mats. There was nothing. And Rob was in there. And so basically he was like, okay. And Scott, he issued some kind of challenge right away. I ran up grappling with Scott on the floor in 5 minutes. And then Rob was like, hey, listen, man, if you can make it through a class, you can train here. Man, Rob wore me out. You know, and I was like in my mind, I'm like, man, this is hard, but I'm not quitting. And Rob's laughing the whole time. It was like his little chuckle. And so I made it through that class, and I was training with him ever since. And I remember Rob telling me these stories because to him they were recent experiences, or maybe just a couple years old, of like, yeah, I trained with Sifu Larry and this guy Yuri Nakamura, of course Guru Dan, right? And Eric Paulson was up and coming. He was a skinny guy. He was maybe in his early 20s. He had long blonde hair. And Rob kind of introduced me and Scott to pretty much all of these guys. And they would come to Charlotte, and like Sifu Larry would come, and we would train, and Eric was with them most of the time, I think, and we'd go to like a local barbecue place and we would train. And I remember just being in awe of the shift in the mindset, because now my instructors were just really comfortable with being a student at the same time. And I was kind of like confused and perplexed and impressed at the same time. Yeah. Because usually the instructor was held in high regard and you didn't question them, you didn't challenge them. And, you know, Rob's like, look, you got to figure it out. I'm going to show you what to do, but you got to test it yourself and come to your own conclusions. And I was just always impressed with that. And then Rob and Scott would take us to go to Sifu Francis's, and for like, you know, Master Chai and Guru Dan, and have all these people come in, and we would, you know, go get a hotel for the weekend and go down there and train for hours in the day, and come back up to Scott's place and train. And I just remember just being blown away. And, you know, the first time I met Larry, he's just this kind of quiet guy that just has a presence about him. And then when he grabs a hold of you, though, it's an entirely different experience. It's like his calm demeanor didn't match his aggression when he got a hold of you. Yeah. And so now I've been training, you know, ever since then. I haven't really even taken a break, except for a short time when we first had our twins. And that's it.
How do you guys feel knowing that you are part of the legacy, this aspect of the Jeet Kune Do legacy? In that I think in Dan's book it says 1972, the only place outside of Los Angeles where you could get JKD training was Charlotte, North Carolina.
You know, I had read that in one of the books, and I was just, you know, I was also still very, very skeptical because of all the BS. You know, I'm Bruce Lee. I train with Bruce Lee, and, you know, it was like, you know, nobody did. and all these people out there teaching. And so when I actually heard of this school, because like in '72 I was 9 years old.
Wow,
So, yeah. So I mean, it wasn't like I was going to be going to train anywhere. I was still a kid. And then a few years later, he was already gone.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know that there was still really a school there that was actually legit or anything like that. So that's when I was told to go see Dickie. I was like, huh? Who's this? And it was so great. Because I mean, at the time I had done a little kickboxing. I wasn't great, but I'd actually done some kickboxing. And it was like you would imagine. It was 99% karate and 0.5% of boxing and a half of just have no clue. And I remember being in the class, and there was this kid. He was 16. He had been training for 6 months total. It was the hardest boxing fight I had ever had. I couldn't believe that, I mean, I was a little full of myself, I guess. I was a black belt. Oh my God. And I fought, and it's like, okay. And this kid, just gave it to me. And it was like, okay, clearly I don't know boxing. Clearly I need to learn this. And, that was a big part of it. And so, we always, every like it was, Mark says, test it out, see if it works. Everything was contact related. We did sparring, we did knife sparring. This was back before you guys have nice training knives now. Back in the day, we didn't have nice training knives. We used a dowel, a piece of wood, or I don't know if you guys have ever seen the really hard wood tantos. Those things are not fun to train with. But we would train with those. And so, I would go home and have these, little round bruises on my chest and on my arms. I was like, where do these come from? It was like, you take a shower and you look in the mirror and it's like, well, I got bruises all over me. What is this? Because we're getting nailed with a stick right in my chest, sort of collie training, I was like, oh, look at that.
Right.
So it was just a part of it. Everything was contact related. Everything was reality based. Everything was cardiovascular. This was back when, Jun Fan, the kickboxing portion, you actually broke a sweat.
Wait. Hang on a second. What are you saying? That you don't break a sweat nowadays?
Well, I'm not saying that now. I'm saying, because I haven't seen anybody train in a long time.
Okay.
I know, Dwight, you remember this. There was that time period where Guru Dan said that for, all the apprentice instructors, if you want to become an associate, you need to train under Master Chai. Yes. You need to be, right? Yes. And the reason he did that was because far too many of the instructors were being instructors. They were not being students. They were not training. They were not in shape. Mm-hmm. And so I guess one way he could force them to do it was say, okay, you got to become an instructor under Ajahn Chai, which meant you had to train to pass his test, which meant you got in shape and your Jun Fan would become better because you would be in shape. Mm-hmm. This was something we always did. And so, I fell in love with Muay Thai. But, we always did the Jun Fan, the JKD, we always did, and, the Kali. It was always something that we did. It was always with contact. It was always with cardiovascular. Yeah.
Have you ever seen anybody's Jun Fan kickboxing approach be Muay Thai like? or have they always kept it separate?
Muay Thai like how? As in technique or as in training method?
Well, as in ability to make you huff and puff.
Yes. And that would be from our school. That's
Yeah. I can tell you right now, let me just say, physically, I could never tell the difference or make a distinction between how much I sweat and put in work between your Kung Fu class or your Muay Thai class.
Right.
Soaking wet every time.
You see, because that's where people were making use of the Muay Thai. They understood what Inosanto's process was. Yes, he forced you to train it to the instructor level, but it was so you could use it to develop something, not as other people out there say, so you could add another style to Jeet Kune Do.
Correct.
Right?
I mean, people that wanted to add the style and train in Muay Thai was the same as people that wanted to train in any other art. You were certainly allowed and encouraged. And, if you fall in love with an art, great.
Right.
But as far as it replacing or being a part of the puzzle, no. Jun Fan Kung Fu is, I know we're going to go down that rabbit hole. It is JKD and it is not JKD.
You opened the door. You got to close it. You got to close it, son. We're not bailing you out of this one.
Yeah, I know you. I watch you. You have these arguments with people all the time, and it's like
That's my job.
Was that?
That's my job.
Yeah. Jun Fan Kung Fu to me is the physical art that was being taught. It was the art before he coined the term and after he coined the term. It was the physical art. Do I think it's important to keep it going? Yes, because a historical manner. Do I think that people can do just Jun Fan Kung Fu and think that they're doing JKD? No, because if you are doing the art exactly as it's taught and you can't make it yours and you can't show someone else how to make it theirs and you're only doing it as an art, you're doing karate, you're doing a kung fu style, you're doing whatever, you're doing a specific system,
right?
And you're locked in that specific system, not allowed to make it yours. I think when Guru Dan, when he said he was riding along in a car and Bruce Lee said to him, what we're doing, this is what it is, and he came up with the term and he I think JKD is hard for people to understand. It's more of an experience than it is something you can tell someone and easily explain it.
Yeah.
Because it is so simple that people can't grasp it. It's too simple. Right. Because of the Western mind, I think the duality, I think Westerners can understand yin and yang, but they can't truly understand that something can be something and not be something at the same time.
Right.
I think it's a difficult concept for people to grasp.
Yeah, let me get Ed to jump in because Ed jumps in on those. Because you heard what Rob said. Rob said, I see you, Dwight, having these arguments, right? Rob stays out of it, right? Ed jumps in sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
So, okay, jump in now. Jump in now and follow up on what Rob said.
Yeah, it is exactly as he said. It and that's, I'm new in this comparatively, and I would see a lot of Sifu Ron Balicki also do the same thing on like YouTube, where he would start arguing with people that were in the comments. And I recently asked him, I was like, did you ever change anyone's mind? Because that's been a big thing for me, as I see people in the comment section just saying things without an understanding of what they're saying, or maybe they do understand and they're playing a part or playing a game. Mm-hmm. And it gets so, it's like an exercise in futility, where it's like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force them to drink. Mm-hmm. And when I see things like that, I want to open the door and I want to push them through, but they can't do that. And I try very hard to walk a line, and I don't do as good as I want to do with it. But I just what is it? A common term is it triggers me. I see it, I get mad, and then I have to go away. Yeah. But, it's
now, Mark, you know how to spell Facebook, right?
Yes, I do.
But that's about it, right?
Yeah, I don't really get into these arguments too much. It's because the scientific part of it is easy to understand. What the process is easy to understand. The individual expression is not, because nobody has the same one. So, but I don't argue on Facebook or social media. And, many times I've had different thoughts on things, and I talk to people, or Sifu Rob will make a comment, and I'm like, okay, I'm not sure I wrap my brain around that. And they'll say, kind of make a comment, and they'll explain his perspective. And I'm like, huh.
Yeah.
I walk away and I think about it for a while, and I'm like, okay, I could see where that makes sense. And like, for example, it used to puzzle me why Guru Dan would teach so much at once. And then a year later, something that he taught just comes out in the middle of training. Yeah. And then I'm like, oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
And now I remember more. And, but it's simple. Like, for those that get it, you don't need an explanation. For those that don't get it, I don't think there's one good enough.
Rob, Rob, did Sifu Dan ever say to you, well, you just got about a year's worth of material?
More than once.
Yeah, he said that to me in 1983, right after my first week. That's what he says, and I'm thinking to myself, that's not possible, right? In 1984 in St. Louis, I go up to him and I go, there is stuff that I have not gotten to yet from last year. Right. So that's when I understood. Rob, I wanted to ask you about something, because I had a school for over 20 years. Ed's got a school. Mark's got a school. You never had your own school, correct?
Well, I taught out of my house. I didn't have a physical school.
Okay.
I like the first it was the basement.
Yeah.
I was in a condo. I shared with a guy, and in the basement, it was really a small place. And that's where I started teaching. And then later on, it was in my garage. But, when I started teaching, I'll admit, I was just selfish. I was doing it because I wanted to train.
Right.
I like teaching. And the more I did it, I think the more I liked it. But the reason I started it was not at all because I wanted to be a teacher. Mm-hmm. I wanted to train, and I needed people to train with.
Yes.
And had, it's funny how word of mouth spreads, because I at no time advertised ever. And, people would come up and want to train, and, people that had experience or had no experience. I also had, this attitude of, you are going to train hard. My class, I taught Monday, Wednesday, Friday night. It was a 3-hour class. That is not 3 1-hour classes. I taught from 7 to 10. I often broke it up into, the different arts, and we would do different things. Right. We would spend time doing more technique and Then we would also do more of just the cardiovascular. Sometimes we would go outside and do Kali because it was pretty tight inside to start using sticks a lot. So indoors would be more the empty hands or knife. We'd go outside and swing some sticks. But I honestly, I was wanting to train myself. Back at that time, my workout was 6 days a week. I would do 20 to 25 rounds of bag work every day. And I would drop 5 pounds of water weight every day. And then, rehydrate or try. And then 3 nights a week, I taught a 3-hour class. The majority of the time, I was a participant, because of usually had the numbers were odd numbers. So I got to work out the same time I was teaching.
Right. Hey, did you ever compare notes on that 25 round thing, Rob, with Rick Fay and Greg Nelson?
Greg Nelson more because he made all the great Smoky Mountain camps too, I believe.
Right. Yes, he did.
So yeah, we were good buds then. We were training partners a lot for the Thai boxing portion. Mm-hmm. That very first year, Ajahn Chai took a couple of us and actually wanted to watch us do stuff privately and just to see how we were.
Yeah.
And then third year on at night after, you were there, weren't you, 1 year? Or did you ever go?
I never made it, no.
Okay, so it was basically you get up in the morning, there was a breakfast, and then we would start training. And so it was kind of like a seminar, but all day long.
Yeah.
There's a break for lunch and a break for dinner. And so there was, an hour of Filipino martial arts. It was an hour of Thai boxing, an hour of John Fan kickboxing, an hour of like sensitivity drills. There would be, people that weren't the core instructors. They would have, Pencak Silat, mm-hmm. and there would be Wing Chun, and we actually had Cliff Linneman teaching in Jitsu one class. Yep. So basically we worked out, 6-7 hours a day. And then at night after dinner, Ajahn Chai took a group of us and he would hold pads and he would train us. And this was our introduction to what Muay Thai was where the feeder would kick the shit out of you. Because up to that point, it was more of the nice training with each other. I mean, it was cardiovascular, it was hard, but, the feeder really didn't beat the shit out of you. This was where do you remember those big old perma-built Thai pads?
Yeah, the NFL, there were 2 versions, right? There was a relatively heavy one, and then there was a super heavy one that was the NFL special, right? Yeah.
You remember those big old things.
Yeah.
The thing I couldn't believe was that, Ajahn Chai is not a large man. I couldn't believe that he could hold those big old heavy pads and punch me in the face whenever he wanted. I was like, my God, how you doing that? He'd say, keep your hands up, sir. Hands up, sir. Yeah. And he'd punch me in the face. And then, when they started kicking the legs, and he's like, I'm only using my foot, sir, which we were extremely thankful for.
Yeah.
But, man, he would just beat the crap out of us. And then we would go down to the river and, it was, in the mountains. So even during the summer, the river was just cold. It's like, go down to the river, son. Walk in above your knees. Get nice training for your legs. So, we did that every year.
Hey, Ed, do you feel that you missed something there?
Yes, that's so I mean, it sounds awful, but it sounds amazing.
It was great training. I mean, like I said, it was a small group of us. There would be a few people that would do it one year and not the next. There's new people coming in, but it was a pretty small group that did it every year.
Yeah.
Greg Nelson and I were probably the most prominent. But yeah, he would just beat the crap out of us and you would learn quickly that your footwork wasn't as good as you thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
And you learn that your cardiovascular wasn't as good as you thought it was.
Yeah.
So,
You see, but once again, right? Bruce Lee himself said what? If you're not fit, you have no business being in martial arts.
exactly.
Right? Okay. So here we're in Thai boxing expressing a Bruce Lee Jeet Kune Do requirement. You know what I mean? So it
Right.
always falls back to, for me, it always falls back to what some people get and what other people don't get. You're making use
Right.
of this particular method of training. A guy asked me, he wanted to interview me about Filipino Kali, and I never got to say this to him, but if somebody wants me to talk about Kali pure Filipino Kali, I feel like a fraud, because my Kali is there only to enhance Jeet Kune Do. So I'm not like a real, Filipino martial arts guy where everything so I don't remember the Villabril 20 count, because that doesn't help me to fight double stick, in my opinion. Right? Now, Heaven 6,
Yeah.
I beat the crap out of anybody with Heaven 6. I don't need a Villabril. Anyhow, it's anyhow, right? Mark, say something.
But it's interesting to see the different generations. And I remember, I was kind of in the transition period between this, because Rob was bringing all of these methods, and I remember, the old gloves, and I remember these MMA gloves, these things that they were trying to figure out were being made, and it was just great to be around. But I believe me, I remember those days of training. If you trained in Jun Fan, you were soaking wet, and I mean, you had a workout. If you did Muay Thai, you had a workout, and I would say the physical intensity was pretty much equal across the board.
Right.
And Rob used to teach at Pete's house too, in the garage. I remember going there and training with you often, and he would bring out all these notebooks, and I would try to copy all the notes I could and make my own. And, and it's just really interesting to see the different decades, because he was more like in the 80s to the 90s, and I'm from the 90s forward, and Ed's from, 10 years after that.
Yeah. I find that the comparison and the contrast between those decades, there's a significant, even though it's all the same, there's still a significant difference. Like what I envy and admire about Ed, because Mark, you're older than Ed is, right? But Ed, to me, I've said this many times before, he's of the generation that was like, yeah, I'll open a school. There was never any thought as to, well, is this thing commercially viable? It was always, I'll open a school. What do you mean? Right? They never stopped to think about that. Are you supposed to, or are you not supposed to?
Do it.
I'll open a school. Right? Rob, I want to ask you something. Oh, go ahead.
Well, talking about opening the school, again, back then, as I said, I was selfish, and I was going to train, and I made people train.
Right.
I had a certain joy of watching people throw up.
Yeah, that's not perverse at all.
It's not. No, it's not. But the thing is, it's like, I had my share of people that come in that wanted to, quote unquote, train and learn and do this, and it's like, they were there for the name only, and not because they actually wanted to learn or wanted to train.
Yeah.
And so, it was just an easy way to get rid of them. I trained to work myself out, but at that time, I thought of opening a school, but it was just the thought that I would have to dilute what I was doing to keep students it wasn't for me. I truly appreciate the people that can,
Right.
You know, I mean, you talk about Greg Nelson. I mean, he's got a very successful school, and he can still teach hardcore and train hardcore. And
Right. Okay. So I got to
that.
push back on what you said.
Okay.
Because I've heard it before. You said, in order to open a school and run a school, I'd have to dilute what I was teaching. Now, if we ask these two young gentlemen here how much diluting there is in their schools, I guarantee you they're going to say there's none.
Well, and that may be true.
So when you talk about diluting, like back then, what did you think that diluting meant in order to run a school?
By dilute, I mean, I don't believe I could have ran it. I don't think I could have kept a number of students to keep a school open by training as hard as I did.
Oh, you mean unless it was a puking school?
Well, no. I mean, look, there wasn't that many people that puked, okay? But there was a few. But I mean, the majority of people don't want to train that hard.
Right.
The majority of people do not want to spar hard.
Mm-hmm.
I know Mark is incredible jiu-jitsu. That is one of the things that I truly admire about Brazilian jiu-jitsu, is that they found a way to spar, and you can do it in a way that is safe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, they can certainly go soft and they can go hard, but you can train it realistically for the most part,
mm-hmm.
and safely at the same time. Where with your striking arts, someone's going to get hit, and it's a whole lot easier to get hurt. And we would. I couldn't tell people we're going to spar next week, bring your gloves. It was more of a, we're sparring tonight.
Yeah.
And people would do it, but if you tell them it's going to be next week, you'd have half your class gone. It was just the way it was. But it was funny when we were doing stick sparring, people liked it more because generally at the time we were using padded sticks. Although I don't think Mark ever saw it, but there was a few of us that went dog brother style because we were crazy. And he was talking about the gloves. Doug Bradford, one of my training partners, we went to a sporting goods store. And this was in the mid 80s, late 80s maybe. And, like, hey, look, lacrosse gloves.
Yes.
And, we would go find, lacrosse stick. And it's like, hey, how good are these gloves? And you'd hold your hand out and just whack it, right?
Yeah.
Or do you remember those like little kid baseball, like foam padded baseball bat? You remember ever seeing those little things? Well, we would get one of those and just start hitting each other in the store. And, I was like, this is great. We're going to buy some of these, and come over, like, what are you guys doing? Stop that. I was like, well, we're just testing it out. Really, it's okay. We're all right. We're not fighting. And, we just, anyways.
Yeah, I think there's a couple. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Are you finished, Rob?
Yeah, sorry.
No. So I think, we all have points, right? And I think, Dwight, none of us would say, yeah, we've watered it down. I think the difference is, like, jiu-jitsu is contact. It's not impact so much. It does have impact, but getting punched in the face is a little different than getting thrown, right? And
right.
Rob, you are like, man, you're an amazing instructor, but you have the way that you teach, and it's not for everybody. And the way I teach is not for everybody either, or Ed or whoever else. But from my personal experience, your classes jump in and get at it. It's not like take your time and, and just because you had a very limited amount of time, you're an optimizer and you want to maximize and optimize every single minute that you have with somebody. So we get to it. And back then the mindset was a little different too. I'm sure you could open a school if you wanted to, but there's more time I think, now afforded to the assimilation process than ever before in martial arts. And years ago, if I opened a school 20 years ago, I don't think I'd have had the patience to let people assimilate as much as I do today either. But, you know, you got to be careful the way you word things, because people kind of read into a message sometimes what ruffles their feathers easily or what they hope to hear. But I don't think any of us are training any easier. But at the same time, 100% of my students don't train the same way that I know, like, say, Sifu Rob, you and I would have trained back in the day.
Yeah.
It's a smaller group out of a bigger group. So, but that hard training is not for everybody. And, you know, but some people, you give them 1 or 2 years and then it's fun for them. And some never want to do it. So some it's a hobby, some take it really serious, you know, but, and Ed's going through this process too, as your school grows.
So might it have been that people were being introduced to the hard sparring too quickly in the old days?
For some, yeah. I think today, no matter what, someone wants to spar until they get punched in the face. And you know,
for us, no, I don't think that we went too soon. It's just that, you know, I maybe I didn't do enough sparring drills before going and allowing them to spar.
Okay, did you see?
We definitely did drills.
Did you see Ed shake his head when you said sparring drills? He nodded.
Yeah.
What's that about, Mr. Stahl?
I'd like to just jump in and say something to you. Like, let me say this to you, very crystal clear. Training, especially with you, Rob, you've never put anyone at risk of training too soon, right? I mean, I feel like we trained at the right time. But if you take 100 people, 10 are going to want to get at it and get hard and like, and then you'll have most of the group where there's a portion that thinks they want to until they do, and then the other part is more like hobbyist recreational. So,
okay, all right.
I remember doing drills.
Okay, Mark, keep that thought and that number of 100. I'm going to come back to you, but Ed, I want it when you acknowledge the sparring drills thing.
Yeah, it for me, when learning about running a school, because I kind of opened the school with my business partner Krav at the time for the sole purpose of having a place to train, and you know, when we did, we made no concession of diluting anything, but then we realized that the way we were doing it was just very bad at retaining anything, students or whatever. And what we found that worked is that building people up with the sparring drills really helped get them ready to spar, and not with holding them or holding them back or anything. Like, so if they wanted to spar, okay, sure, you know, be whatever happens. But the sparring drills helped weed out those people that Sifu Robin mentioned that just wanted the name. I had a student come in, not a student, had a person come in who, you know, to be a Jeet Kune Do person that said, I learned everything from the movies. And when we were like, okay, well, we're going to spar, he's like, oh, I don't do that. I'm like, well, then you're not doing anything related to Jeet Kune Do at this point. And you know, because we were just doing sparring drills and like, okay, let's go. You know, we're going to put the timer on and here we go. And he was like, whoa, I don't want to do any of that. And we're like, well, then, you know, I guess we're done. And I'm sure, you know, I wish that person well, but it's just one of those things where what are you doing? If you're not sparring drills or doing anything like that, like, that's such an important part. And yes, it is easier, like, on the body and the impact with jiu-jitsu. Yeah. That's why I like jiu-jitsu. But it's one of those things where, you know, you can't say you're doing this without doing that.
Okay. Now, Mr. Cukro.
Yes.
What is the strategy for retaining 100% of those 100 students?
Okay. So, and of course, this is my opinion. And, you know, let me just say this too. I'm one of the guys that when we were training, it was like, let's put some gloves on and hit it. So I'm totally, you know, all for that. But, you know, as I get a little older too, I would like to believe that some wisdom comes with that, but also just an understanding of everything. And so the thing is to figure out what people really want and then to test where they stand once they find out, if that makes sense. So I'm going to find out in more of an incremental approach than just putting them all in, so to speak. Like, I'll give you an example. Some people, they do the 1-2 series. Sounds great. The 1-3 series. They're having fun. They're hitting mitts. They're getting a sweat. Then you go jab for jab, 2 for 2, 3 for 3, whatever that is. And you call it 50% power, and someone hits you with 99, but they said it was 50. Okay, stop. Let's work on that. We're going to actually have you hit it 50%, then hit a little bit harder. Now, and Rob used to do this. He would break rhythm. And now I was like used to having a solid 1-2 rhythm. And now it's 1 with a broken rhythm. And then I would get hit a little bit more. And then he would back off a little bit more until I felt comfortable and could move. And so the idea is to tailor it a little bit more to the person at a slower pace. But those drills, let me tell you, a lot of people overlook those drills. The sparring drills and the catch drills, to me, are like, they're one of the best things you could do, because people now are getting accustomed to having things move with them and trying to get hit and getting hit before they spar. So when they spar, it's not such a shock. It's like a fun surprise that they get to do, as opposed to being, electric, like just lit up for the first time. So I think that's it. But you're going to lose people no matter what, that think they're tough until they get punched in the face. You're going to lose people that come in to do jiu-jitsu or grappling as soon as they get choked and they can't win one match. And so that's where the coaching comes in, to let people know, look, we all started like you too. I didn't know how to put gloves on. I didn't know how to tape my hands. I didn't know how to put a belt on. And but that's it. And let me tell you, man, I am still teaching what Rob and everybody else taught me back in the day today, the same way.
Right. And
but the way they're introduced to it might be a little different, mostly because of my personality and just some of the things I've learned along the ways. But it's not diluted, it watered down in any way. It's just my methodology of delivery is maybe a little different, but that's it. You have to keep the integrity of that. Yeah. And you can't say you're doing kickboxing if you're not kicking and boxing, and you can't say you're doing grappling if you're not getting joint locks and chokes.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. See, because so people think on Facebook that I'm like some kind of Jeet Kune Do historian. Rob, if he talked more on Facebook, they would know that he is a true JKD historian. So I got a question for you, Mr. Kelly. In Chris Kent and Tim Tackett's book, I think it's the Jeet Kune Do kickboxing book, they write that Dan Inosanto had a huge influence on the curriculum when he added the sparring drills. Right? You know what I'm talking? You're familiar with what I'm talking about?
I haven't read the book in a long time, but yeah, I do. Yes, the drills. Yeah.
Yeah, because there was some. It actually reminded me of something that you said earlier, where, overnight, Bruce Lee comes up with a new name for his art. Right. But if the day on Saturday evening, it was the Jun Fan method. On Sunday, we come up with the term Jeet Kune Do. Right. On Monday, how substantially different is what we're teaching, even though it now has a new name? Correct. No, it's not. And you see how crazy people are? Yes, it is. It's not different. And I think, again, part of it comes down to, right, man. When they say, original JKD versus concepts JKD. Well, I really love what Guru Dan said. Original in 66, original in 67, original in 70, and how things sometimes were changing, on a monthly basis. So if you had trained in 69, but you didn't train in 72, well, which original are you doing? And also, one thing that
Bruce Lee was known for was to teach to the person. You know, he would customize how he taught because of the person's build, their strength, their speed, the way they moved, to fit in for that person. So if you learn something from him, it certainly was JKD, but it's not the same thing that your classmate learned necessarily, because he may have taught something slightly different to him because of his personal attributes. So if that's what you learned and that's what you think is the way, well, you're stuck in that I'm doing karate because this is the way it was taught and this is the way I'm going to do it and this is the way it is, as opposed to this is part of the way and I need to explore it and find out what is for me and what is for you. The teaching things, we all know things that we don't do extremely well. We know how to do them. We can teach them. Doesn't mean that we can do them really well and that we're going to use them ourselves, right? I mean, I'm sure you have tons of techniques that you can teach and you can teach it well. You can perform it, but are you actually going to use it? You probably won't. So your JKD is the things that you can use, but you got to know those things that you can't use, but do work for certain people, certain builds, certain attributes, certain times, and you should be able to teach them so that they can use it or they can explore it and figure out if it works for them or not.
Right.
And of course, this all changes every few years as we get older, and flexibility isn't what it used to be. And, Mark kind of alluded to sometimes.
I don't have that problem. I am in exactly the same shape I was in when I first met you, Rob.
Well, you're the only one, because I'm not.
when I met Rob Kelly, to me, he was Dickie Harrell Jr. That was my image of Rob Kelly. He was, yeah.
I remember the first time I ever held pads for Rob. I was like, oh my God. How can someone kick so hard?
Yeah.
I couldn't wrap my brain around it.
Rob, were you there when Dickie got introduced to Thai boxing?
No, that was before. He had just been introduced, I think. I could be wrong, but it was either the year before, or I think it was like a few months before, or the year before I started.
Okay.
Because Thai boxing, I mean, they actually had some of the old permanent Thai pads then, so he actually had it. He had been introduced to it.
Right. Do you know the story of it?
What's that?
Do you know the story of it? Because I've seen the video. And I know that it was a seminar or a camp or somewhere that Sifu Francis was there as well. I know that much. And Sifu Dan just gets the pads out and calls Rob up, calls Dickie up, and double kicks ensued.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I think that was the year before I started. Because I remember when I started, they had the old big permabuilt Thai pads.
Right.
And we did a little bit of it. It was mainly the Junfan kickboxing, but we did a little bit of the Thai boxing when we started. Because this was before Ajahn Chai was teaching on seminars.
Yeah.
Because the first time we saw him was the first camp, first Smoky Mountain camp.
But that was 86, right?
Yes.
I saw him before you then.
I think it was 86, yeah.
I saw him in, let me get it right. I saw him in 85. And I saw him in 85 in St. Louis.
Yeah.
older.
And I was so scared, I didn't see him again until 1991 when I tested, right? So I said that was it, because Smoky Mountain was not for me. Cold rivers at night.
You know, it was something you wanted to be in. You know, your legs were burning, and you knew that the cold water was going to help.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can ask Greg. Ajahn Chai was our tester.
Really? Wow.
Suicide. That's called suicide.
And you know, the testing got harder and harder, and you know, in the first few years when we tested people, it really wasn't that bad. And then things started to change a little bit, and it got a little more involved, and a little bit harder, and you know, it was good.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen. I just realized we've been on here for over an hour, guys, and I know there's Mark probably has some barbecuing to do in the backyard. Who knows what Ed gets up to on Sundays, right? And Rob, I'm sure you got to work tomorrow, right?
I'm actually off tomorrow.
But
yeah,
we could just get rid of the two of them, and you and I could stay on for the rest of the night. But listen, Mr. Kelly, I'm so happy that you were I was finally able to get you on here. I wanted to actually. I think I'm in trouble with Dickie Harold because I know that I reached out to him a long time ago, and then I guess I messed up and didn't get back to him. So if you hear that I've been calling him, pleading him to come on the show, would you all call in and say, Dickie, Dwight's really a good guy. You should do the program. All right.
Definitely.
I really appreciate you guys spending some time with me. Say that, Mark.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate being on here with you and everybody, and Sifu Rob and Ed. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you guys so much. It's been awesome to hear all the good stories. And I actually have only met Sifu Rob once at an Inasanto seminar in Atlanta. But I'd heard nothing but terrifying stories from Sifu Scott Shields and Sifu Mark. I'm scared to introduce myself. Yeah, I was just like, oh, he just made me talk for like an hour and a half. I was like, oh.
It's not true. It really isn't. I'm a nice guy.
Yeah. I don't remember where I met Rob. I assume it was probably in Atlanta.
I'm sure it was Atlanta.
Yeah, it probably was. I mean, back then, geez, we used to be there 3 times a year.
Yeah.
You know, this is ridiculous. Anyhow, gentlemen, it was my pleasure getting together with you. I really appreciate your spending some time. Rob Kelly, stay strong, man. It was good to talk to you.
It was great to talk to you guys. And for Mark, and I don't think I've ever threatened Ed with showing up someday unannounced, but it's going to happen.
All right,
I've told Mark a couple of times that I'm just going to show up someday, and I haven't yet because I'm a slack. I'll go ahead and tell Ed it'll happen someday. I'll just show up.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, cool. All right, guys, thanks again, man. All right, have a great evening.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Bye.